I was elected to change our broken and dangerous system and thinking in government that has weakened and endangered our country and left our people defenseless. And I will not stop fighting for the safety of you and your families, believe me. Not today, not ever. We're going to win it. We're going to win it. We're going to apply common sense. We're going to apply intelligence. And we're never quitting, and we're never going away, and we're never, ever giving up.
Ryan was saying that he just wants to keep Americans safe. Yesterday, he talked about the budget as well.
Yeah.
His skinny budget was released, and that's why we bring in Mick Mulvaney, who is the director of White House Office of Management and Budget. Thanks for being with us.
Morning, Al. How do you do this every single morning?
We don't. Sometimes we tape it the night before.
We go
to bed really early.
How do I get rid of these things?
But you have a big day today. At 7 o'clock, you're officially releasing the budget. We have the skeleton of it. What are some of the highlights that you want to bring out?
Real simple. You had an American First candidate. You have an America First president. Now you have an America First budget. We're spending more money to defend the country, more money to enforce the laws, more money to secure the borders, more money to take care of our vets, more money for school choice, and less money for things like foreign aid. That's exactly what the president said he was going to do. That's what the budget is.
So 54 million more, 4 billion, sorry. You're right, it is early. 54 billion more for the military. Big cuts at the Department of State and the EPA. What's going to be impacted if you have the big cuts that you want?
Foreign aid. I mean, most of the foreign aid that we give, most of the money that we give for things like climate change research, the money that we contribute to the climate change movement is in the foreign aid budget. So that's not surprising that you see those budgets come down.
Rex Tillerson was saying that the spending levels in the past at the State Department have just been unsustainable. He says he's fine with these cuts, and it's a challenge for him to find ways so that they can work with the president. What is the EPA's response?
EPA is going to do the same thing. Again, the EPA knew, Scott Pruitt knew that he was taking over an agency that the president wanted to shrink. And we know, looking at the numbers that we still have in the EPA, we know they can still do their core function of making sure the environment is clean, but it stops that mission creep we've seen for so long.
I know it's got to be frustrating for you. I mean, nobody wants to cut anything in theory, but you're $20 trillion over budget. And this doesn't necessarily cut the deficit. What it does is stop the increase of the spending. But 28% cut in State Department, when that came out, your defense secretary says, that means I got to buy more ammunition. He thinks that it's a mistake, essentially, in Defense Secretary Mattis. So you're going to get a lot of this.
Sure.
Also, you had Senator Lindsey Graham saying this State Department cut, if that lands on our desk, it's dead on arrival.
Well, let's make no mistake about this. This is not a soft power budget like you saw with the Obama administration. This is a hard power budget. You got $54 billion more worth of defense. And yes, the soft power comes out of the State Department. That's exactly what the president wants.
One of the other areas is NPR and PBS. You're going to phase out the funding for that eventually, right?
Sure. And I think the president finally got to the point where he said, do I really want to make the coal miner in West Virginia, the auto worker in Ohio, the single mom in Detroit pay for the National Endowment for the Arts or the Corporation for Public Broadcasting? The answer is no.
He won. A lot of people went to the polls to vote for him because of his business sense and because he is able to make money and make a profit. Have you seen him be able to do that? When he goes through line by line of the budget, what is it like to be in the room with him?
It's fantastic. It's like being back in the private sector again.
Why?
Because he'll ask, does this actually make any sense? Does this actually help people? Is this a good use of our money? And I'm sure, I get the impression that question hasn't been asked for a long time in Washington, D.C.
Right. I also get the sense that if he's going to be effective in this revolutionary president, he's going to go through the Defense Department and other areas and say, I'll give you $54 billion, but you're not going to spend it the way you've been spending it. And it's got to be more than Boeing. Am I correct? It's got to be down, up and down.
That's exactly right. He's very proud of the fact he's already saved us several billions of dollars through his negotiations, and I know he's told General Mattis, because I've talked to him, that we want that same attitude out of the Secretary of Defense.
One of the things is, by having a smaller budget, ultimately, where certain departments are downsized, you're starting to drain the swamp. The swamp doesn't like that.
Including Republicans.
And there's going to be programs that our special interests don't like that we're cutting, that individual members of Congress don't like. But the president doesn't represent special interests. He doesn't represent a particular district or a state. He represents everybody, and that's what's reflected in these numbers.
Is he going to wind up going to sell the budget as he is health care?
I think I'm off to sell the budget, but certainly he's selling the top-line message, which is more money for defense, more money for our vets, more money for border enforcement without adding to the deficit.
Yesterday we did a story, and we're going to interview someone who's involved with this, one of the congressmen down in Florida. We did a story on the VA, how they're not putting the picture up of the president. And when I was reading the budget, he's pouring money into the military and making our country safe.
Yeah, we'll fix that. The president's picture is going to go up.
Right, at any price. You could also print that out, or you get a color printer. You could save some money that way, and wireless too. Mr. Director, the other thing is the big thing you're selling. I've already seen you more than any OMB director ever, but now you're also selling the repeal and replace of Obamacare. The negotiation will be in the Rules Committee, we understand. There's been a frustration among some of your best friends with the lack of negotiation on what's been presented. When are we going to see what the president said last night, the negotiation part of it?
The negotiations have been going on for a long time, and I'm involved with that. One of the reasons you've been seeing me, there'll be a budget vote in committee, I believe, today. And the Rules Committee vote will be early next week, and those negotiations will go on. Keep in mind where we are. This is a budget framework. It's a really good framework. It does what the president said, repeal and replace. But we didn't take a final product and force it down lawmakers' throats. We offered the framework and let them work on those negotiations before a vote.
But it doesn't really repeal. It amends the Affordable Care Act. It says that in the first paragraph.
Keep in mind that the Democrats were able to pass a lot of Obamacare with 60 votes in the Senate when they had it. We don't have that now.
That hasn't been emphasized.
Right. So
you can't do it through reconciliation.
That's right. We can only use reconciliation for 50 votes. You can't repeal all of it that way.
But right now, according to Chuck Grassley, who has been in the Senate for the state of Iowa for decades, there are not the votes there in the Senate at this point, and the problem is a bunch of House Republicans don't want to put their necks on the line to vote for something that isn't going to pass the Senate, because then in 2 years, they're out of a job. They worry.
I've been there before. That's the way the process works. There's no perfect piece of legislation. There's going to be this framework. It's going to be added to or subtracted from during the process, and eventually it's going to pass the House and it's going to pass the Senate.
What's the timeline? Because last night the president was talking about he wants to cut the, quote, hell out of taxes, he said. But in order to do that, we have to repeal and replace Obamacare. So what's the time frame for both of those?
Correct. Keep in mind the way it works is that we're working off a 2017 reconciliation. This is really boring, and I apologize, but Obamacare has to repeal or replace has to go first, and then we do another budget, the 2018 budget, and that would allow us to reconcile for tax reform, which would be next.
He brought up last night cutting the spending on actually pharmaceuticals, and he mentioned Elijah Cummings in the meeting that he had. He said after this passes, then we're going to go back in again. I thought to myself, wait a second, what do you mean after it passes? You're going to change this, in theory, if you can get the votes and pass it, you're going to change it again?
Sure, because again, the things they're talking about with Mr. Cummings, who was on the committee with me, requires 60 votes. They're going to take some bipartisan support. There is bipartisan support for other types of health care reform outside of just Obamacare repeal and replace. For example, the EpiPen is way too expensive. One of the things we learned is that that's because the regulations on medical device providers, pharmaceutical companies, are just so high that they're much more expensive here than they are, say, in Europe. Mr. Cummings knows that. Republicans know that. Those are the types of things we work on.
So you want to be able to buy from Europe?
No, we want to have some of the same systems where it's easier to get new products approved. But EpiPen is a couple of dollars in Europe. It's $600 for a pair here. And that's the kind of stuff we need to change with 60 votes.
Right, with 60 votes. But if you have a shot at buying it in Europe, it'll force the price down because no one will buy it here.
We're going to try and make them here and buy them here.
All right. Very good.
Thanks,
Mick, thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
It's not that early. It's okay.
It's a little early for me on the line.
You can sleep on the shuttle back.
How do the people watching feel right now? Yeah, you're right. It's early. Let's go back to bed. No, stay up.
That's right.